In the history of global wars and in the history of regional wars, Africa has been an indirect recipient of these wars. When the world wars, World War One and World War Two were being fought, Africa was an indirect recipient of this war. In most of these wars, Africa was not a battleground primarily. But currently, we are talking about a modern war, that is the war between Russia and Ukraine. And this war, the effects have been indirectly felt in Africa, if not directly. Because when I talk about direct effects of this war, I will be specific to Ukraine and Russia. But the indirect effects of this war have been felt in Africa, mostly and prominently. For example, in my country, the hike in fuel prices has been attributed to the war between Russia and Ukraine. But recent developments indicate that there is a real war coming to Africa. Recent developments in the Russia-Ukraine war informs of a possible actual war in African countries. A recent post that I shared on this platform, I argued that Africa is the new Cold War site. Why did I say that Africa is the new Cold War site? I said so because the likes of the United States, which was a party in Cold War, and Russia, which was also a party in Cold War, are resuming their diplomatic entangles in Africa. These two superpowers are fighting for control of African resources. They are fighting for control of African countries, and they are fighting for alliance with African governments. That is why I said that Africa is becoming a new Cold War site. But recent developments attributed to the Russia-Ukraine war show that Africa is becoming an active site for actual war. Russia and Ukraine are now transferring their transgressions, their conflicts to Africa. Why am I saying this? I read a post by CNN. This was a post, an article which was published yesterday, 19th September 2023, and updated at 3:53 p.m. This article is titled Ukraine Special Services Likely Behind Strikes on Wagner-Backed Forces in Sudan, a Ukrainian military source says. Now, to simplify this title, it is simply saying that Ukraine launched drone strikes in Sudan. We know that Sudan is an African country, and Sudan has been reeling in conflicts since April 15th. Since April 15th this year, there fighting emerged in Sudan between two rival forces, and these two rival forces, we are being told that they were once members of the same group. The fighting is a power struggle between army chief, the army chief officer Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and his former deputy Rapid Support Forces General Commander Mohamed Hamdan Emet Dagalo. These two individuals are fighting for control of the country. Remember, Sudan is an oil-rich country, and it is also rich in gold and other minerals. These two individuals have been fighting in Sudan, and the fighting between these two individuals has attracted global attention, with countries like the United Kingdom, Russia, the United States issuing statements either supporting or discrediting the current conflict in Sudan. I am saying that Russia-Ukraine war is being transferred from the actual fighting sites to Africa. Africa is now becoming a new site for actual war. These individuals who are fighting in their own countries, Russia and Ukraine, have now transferred their actual engagements, military bombardments from Russia and Ukraine, and they are bringing to the doorsteps of Africans. They are bringing it to Sudan. Now, if you read the article that was posted by the CNN, which I've just summarized the title, CNN are saying that by the time of collecting evidence on this, CNN was unable to independently confirm Ukraine's involvement in the series of strikes which affected Sudan some days ago. And what they are saying in this article, that two commercially available drones widely used by Ukrainians were involved in at least 8 of the strikes, with Ukrainian text seen on the drone controller. Experts also said the tactics used, namely the pattern of drones swooping directly into their target, were highly unusual in Sudan and the wider African region. Although Ukraine has not officially claimed responsibility for the attacks, which were captured in the drone footage, portions of those videos have been circulating on social media since Thursday. Last week, the footage of the ground operation has not previously been published. Now, I have no problem with all those issues which are being published there, but I have a problem with Russia launching drone attacks in Sudan on the rapid support forces, which is they consider the United States and the United Nations consider them as a terrorist organization. Remember, the rapid support forces are fighting against the government forces. Now, Ukraine launched drone strikes on the rapid support forces. And in one of the videos that I also posted on this platform, I said that Russia is supporting the rapid support forces. It is supporting the rebels against the government. Now, that means that Russia is with the rapid support forces, and Ukraine is now supporting an ally of Russia. That means that Ukraine is simply attacking Russia. Where? In Africa, specifically in Sudan. I want to tell Africans, like I have always said, we do not need to fight a war that we don't know its origin and its consequences. The Russia-Ukraine war is a war between Russia and Ukraine. The Russia-Ukraine war is not a war between Africa and Ukraine. It is not a war between Africa and Russia. It is not a war between Africa and the United States. It is a war between Russia and Ukraine. And Africa's involvement in this war should be minimal, if not available. African countries must not take sides in the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, the current developments in Sudan are because of their open declaration of support of Russia in the Ukrainian invasion. The rapid support forces openly offered their support to Russia in their invasion in Ukraine, and for some time now they have been engaging Russia militarily. Russia has been supplying the rapid support forces with weapons to help them fight against the government forces. This is why the rapid support forces are becoming the targets of Ukraine. If this establishment is true, then a war is coming to Africa. And to be specific, a war is coming to Russia-allied African countries. All countries that are allied to Russia, then they are prime targets of Ukraine. Ukraine will continue to launch drone attacks on all countries, on all forces supporting Russia in Africa. That is simply to say that war is coming to Africa. And if war is coming to Africa, then Africans must be worried, because Africans do not have the military capability to fight a war. They do not have a military capability to fight a global war. They do not have the military capability to fight Ukraine. Neither do they have a military capability to fight Russia or the United States. I think Africans and African countries must not take sides in this war. African countries must not take sides in the Russia-Ukraine war. They must be neutral, like the United States did in World War I for some time. African countries must be neutral in the Russia-Ukraine war to avoid such things which are now happening to Sudan. If Ukraine decides to invade Sudan now, meaning that Sudan will be fighting a two-front conflict. The Rapid Support Forces will be fighting against the government forces of Sudan, and the Rapid Support Forces will also be fighting against Ukraine. At the same time, Russia will be supporting the Rapid Support Forces against Ukraine. Simply to say, war is coming to Africa. And we know that Africa is defenseless when it comes to war. And if war is coming to Africa, then Africans must hold their governments accountable. They must question their government's involvement with these foreign governments, because they will be the primary victims in this war. If Ukraine or the United States decides to invade Sudan, the primary victims of this invasion will be the Sudanese, will be the innocent civilians of Sudan. And this can be prevented only by being neutral, not publicly declaring sides. And if that is done, then war can be prevented in countries like Sudan. But currently, war is coming to Africa, and Africa must be ready to defend itself. If Africa is not ready to defend itself, then Africa will be destroyed. That is a fact. With the current happenings in Sudan, it means that there is a possible real conflict in Sudan, a possible real conflict in Africa. And Russia and Ukraine are transferring their fighting to Africa. They are transferring their military bombardments to Africa. They are bringing the war to Africa. Is Africa ready for this war? Is Africa capable of defending itself against global superpowers like the United States, Russia, Ukraine, and the rest? And who will be held accountable if a real war comes to Africa? Who will be held accountable if innocent civilians are killed as a result of this war? I believe the persons who will be held accountable are African presidents, are African administrators, because they invited these foreigners, they established diplomatic relations with these foreigners, and they must also be accountable for anything that happens to the innocent lives in Africa.